Hi, it's Patrick Hutzel from IntensiveCareHotline.com, where we instantly improve the lives of families of critically ill patients in intensive care, so that you can have peace of mind, real power, real control, and so that you can influence decision making fast, even if you're not a doctor or a nurse in intensive care. This is another episode of Your Questions Answered, and in last week's episode I answered another question from one of our readers, and the question last week was: my mother is in intensive care in a public hospital but wants to go to a private hospital. What should we do? You can check out the answer to last week's question if you're clicking on the link below this video. In this week's episode of Your Questions Answered, I answer another question from one of our readers, and the question this week is: my mother has cancer and is in ICU on a ventilator with tracheostomy, and now they want to send her out to a long-term facility. Help. Hi, Patrick. My name is Dathina from Chicago in the United States, and I have a question regarding my mother. She recently had a removal of cancer in her esophagus about 3 weeks ago, and she was intubated on the ventilator because of the surgery. Right after the surgery, there were complications where they found a little bit of cancer on her heart as well, and from then forward she had many other complications as well. Now my mother has been on the ventilator, and now they've tried over a couple of weeks to take her off the ventilator, but it wasn't successful. My mother is a patient who has asthma, and they introduced a tracheostomy last Friday, and now they tell me yesterday that they want to transfer her to a long-term facility. My question is, does this now mean that my mother is a long-term patient and that she won't get off the ventilator, or does it mean that there is nothing else they can do for her on the ventilator? Or do they want to send her to the facility so that they can help her to get better and off the ventilator? I'm very clueless in this situation. I am a CAN, which is a Certified Assistant in Nursing, and I have 10 years of experience, and some of the doctors are not answering my questions. And I have questions about the complications because my mother had surgery on March the 21st. And from my understanding, she was intubated and then extubated, and I wanted to know the difference between the surgery and 3 weeks later having even more surgery. Now she has had more surgery, and there were so many more complications, and I really want to know what I should do. I really need to know if my mother will get off the ventilator. She had the tracheostomy since last Friday, and I really need to know if she's got to get off this ventilator. They have mentioned that they will be transferring her to this other facility today, so they are trying to transfer her as soon as possible to this long-term care facility. But long-term care just makes me think of a place where she's got to be living long-term, and that's not what we want for my mother. We want her to be able to come home. Hi Dathina. Thank you so much for making contact, and thank you for sending me your message. I'm so sorry to hear what your mother, you and your family are going through. I know this is a tough time in your and your mother's life, and I know it's not easy having a loved one in intensive care, especially if it's ongoing and there's no end in sight. There are a few things you need to know and understand in this situation. First of all, I think it's absolutely appalling that your questions regarding the surgery and the complications, as well as the tracheostomy and the possible transfers to this other facility, have not been answered and addressed. It just goes to show to me that many intensive care teams don't take the questions and concerns of their patients and families serious enough. It's even worse to know that your mother has been in intensive care since the 21st of March, and you still haven't been answered all of your questions. Shame on the intensive care team. But enough rambling there, let's move on to some practical answers in your situation. So, I'm very surprised to hear that not even 1 week after the tracheostomy has been inserted, that the intensive care team wants to send your mother to a long-term care facility. Less than 1 week is a very short time frame for somebody to be leaving intensive care after they had a tracheostomy. I would imagine that the intensive care team wants to empty their beds as quickly as possible, and the longer a patient stays in intensive care, the less money or funding the hospital gets for those patients. Therefore, the intensive care team is most likely trying to send them out as soon as possible, or in some instances make them even NFR, which is not for resuscitation, or DNR, which is do not resuscitate, which obviously doesn't seem to be the case with your mother. Normally, after a tracheostomy has been inserted, the weaning process is only at the start, and patients should be in an intensive care environment for at least another week or 2 weeks before any further decision should be made what the next steps are. As I have said, I can only imagine that the intensive care team and or the hospital suspects they are losing money and resources, which would be beds and staff, if they continue treating your mother in intensive care. Therefore, it would be extremely important for you to find out what other complications she had and whether the transfer to a long-term care facility would not compromise those complications. Your next job is really to find out the details about those complications and find out whether the long-term care facility is able to give your mother the best possible care in light of those complications. Also, the other question you should be asking is whether the intensive care team wants to send your mother out quickly because they want to cover up some mistakes. Once again, you mentioned numerous complications, and it appears to be a little strange to me that they want to send your mother out of intensive care only 1 week after a tracheostomy has been inserted. This is an unusually short time frame to me. The next question you had was whether your mother will get off the ventilator. The answer to that question depends on a number of things, including how well your mother is, whether she's depressed, for example. Long-term ventilated patients with tracheostomy in intensive care need a lot of attention, and you need to make sure that your mother will get the best possible care, such as that she's having regular washes, regular mouth care, regular showers, regular mobilization in a chair, getting outside into the sun and getting some fresh air if her condition allows. Also, make sure she's having experienced nursing staff looking after her. And make sure she is on a weaning regime, so that she has time off the ventilator and so that she can be gradually weaned off. You also should consider home care as an option, and I know you are in Chicago in the United States. In countries like Australia and in many European countries, there are intensive home care services for long-term ventilated adults and children with tracheostomy as a genuine alternative to a long-term stay in intensive care. Check out intensivecareathome.com.au for more information. Similar services might be available in your area as well, however, I'm not sure. Also, you check out our blog section for more tips and strategies how you can deal with this difficult situation. And I have attached some related articles that will help you understand more about tracheostomy and ventilator dependency at the end of this article. So, how can you have more peace of mind, more control, more power and more influence whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care? You get to that all-important feeling of peace of mind, control, power and influence when you download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn quickly how to get peace of mind, real power and real control, and how you can influence decision making fast whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Your free Instant Impact Report gives you in-depth insight that you must know whilst your loved one is critically ill or is even dying in intensive care. Sign up and download your free Instant Impact Report now by entering your email below. In your free Instant Impact Report, you learn how to speak the secret intensive care language so that the doctors and the nurses know straight away that you are an insider and that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care. In your free report, you will also discover how to ask the doctors and the nurses the right questions. You will discover the many competing interests in intensive care and how your critically ill loved one's treatment may depend on those competing interests. You will discover how to eliminate fear, frustration, stress, struggle and vulnerability even if your loved one is dying. You'll get 5 killer tips and strategies helping you to get on the right path to peace of mind, control, power and influence in your situation. You'll get real-world examples that you can easily adapt to your and your critically ill loved one's situation. How to stop being intimidated by the intensive care team and how you will be seen as equals. You'll get crucial behind-the-scenes insight so that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care and how you need to manage doctors and nurses in intensive care, and it's not what you think. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Your Questions Answered, and I'll see you again in another update next week. Make sure you also check out our blog section for more tips and strategies, or send me an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com with your questions. This is Patrick Hutzel from intensivecarehotline.com, and I'll see you again next week in another update.